My pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce our general session this morning, the speakers for our general session this morning. The Georgia Forestry Association and the Foundation, through its advocacy and educational efforts, are dedicated to maintaining a strong future for our forestry assets and for our land and for our landowners and our manufacturers that are here in the state of Georgia. Our first speaker today will be Mr. Andres Villegas, and he is the president and CEO of the Georgia Forestry Association. And Andres will discuss the vision and the purpose of the foundation and how the organization will move forward in serving the forestry community in the state of Georgia. And just as a side, I'm going to introduce all our speakers, just kind of like we did yesterday, introduce our speakers, give each one of them an opportunity to give their presentation, and then we'll come back up at the end and take questions from the audience that we may have. So our second speaker will be Mr. Jim Gillis. He is no stranger to many of us in this room. He's a financial advisor at Raymond James, and he has a colleague with him, Miss Jenny Connolly, who is a vice president of Raymond James Trust North America, and Jenny is based out of Nashville, Tennessee. So we're certainly glad to have you, Jenny, and look forward to your remarks that you're going to share with us. They're here to provide a detailed overview of the opportunities for planned giving as part of estate and trust planning. So with that, I will turn it over to Andres and let you get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Always a pleasure to be introduced by the chairman of our foundation, especially for this particular topic. Get it over on the right screen. Maybe. There we go. So good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you again this morning. I think we've had a great couple days of discussions, and yesterday was packed with a lot of interesting speakers. And so our job here this morning is to shift gears a little bit and talk to you about where we see a future for our foundation, and really more importantly, ways that you can be engaged with us more directly. We talked a lot about where we see the development of policy yesterday and just a variety of other things. And ultimately, that's part of the core mission of the association. But there's also a bigger picture here that we've got to be, I guess, conscious of, and that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. And that's really ultimately about what people think about forestry in Georgia in general, not just our elected officials. And that's a bit of a heavier lift, and we've done a good job over the years of trying to address that in different ways. But we really want to see if we can take a different approach to it, a more strategic approach to it that gives us some long-term benefit to everyone in this room and to our industry. So what I'm going to talk about today is the history of the foundation, the challenge that we have at hand in this room and across our entire industry, the association versus the foundation, to maybe start thinking about it a little bit differently, and kind of where we're at with regards to our process of a strategic review that was initiated back in December. Both the Board of Trustees for the foundation and the Executive Committee of the association approved the beginning of a strategic review. Which has been a wonderful process for us. It's in some ways it's made us a little uncomfortable, but it's made us reflect very, very hard on what we want to be in 20 years, and that can be hard if you think about where you're going to be in 20 years personally. If you ever have had that question in your interviews for a job or otherwise, it can be a hard thing to figure out sometimes. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and really I think the best place to start for us is kind of where we've been. And I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about this today because I am when we sat down and we thought about where we've been, there's nothing that makes me prouder to see the things that we've been able to accomplish. And it's a lot. We've done some really wonderful things. And that's really due to the passion, the vision, and the leadership of a lot of you in this room and a lot of folks in our association. So don't want to ever minimize the contributions that people have made in their time, energy, passion, and financial contributions to the foundation and to the association, because it's gotten us to where we're at today. You know, and when we look at it, the foundation was started in 1989, and really in a lot of ways, with one mission in mind, and that was to give us the funds to be able to build the building we're in Forsyth. Beautiful building. I can't tell you how many people come to visit that facility for meetings or other things from outside our industry and inside our industry, and they just say, wow, you know. And that is a tangible example of what we're capable of. So in 2003, after raising 1.5 million people, we opened the doors to our headquarters in Forsyth, with the Center for Forestry Education, as we call it. And since then, we've had 15,000 people come through that building for different types of meetings, seeing the materials, the products that we produce, and the people that are behind it through the display cases and other things that we have in there. And oftentimes, people will be touching, the product tree that we had for a little while in the lobby, and say, "Wow, I didn't know that." Baseball helmets had cellulose in it, or whatever it may be. And so I think we've done a good job being able to share that message through the center. In 2007, we celebrated the 20-year anniversary of Project Learning Tree. Since 1987, we've trained about 20,000 teachers through the Project Learning Tree program. That gives us that opportunity to be throughout the year in front of students and at multiple different K through 12 grades, and really sharing our message of what forestry means in their daily lives. In 2011, we raised funds for an ecosystem study that was done at the University of Georgia. That gave us an idea of the ecosystem services value of $38.6 billion that goes back into or the value of the things that we do through clean air, clean water, wildlife habitat, recreation, things of that nature. And in 2014, we started Forestry, a foundation for our future. That allowed us to start working with teachers and in a different way, and kind of thinking about what are the ways that we can engage at the school level. In 2015, we had the 10-year anniversary of the Teacher Conservation Workshop, and in 11 years, we've trained over, I think, 330 teachers through that program. We've also supported the FFA Foundation Junior Forestry Competition, as well as the Blakely County FFA Forestry Competition, and one of my favorite projects, the Billy Lancaster Forestry Youth Camp, has also been one of the things that we supported. And through SAF, we've supported the publication of How Forestry Came to the South. So a lot to be proud of, and we've done a lot of really good things. So, as we look at this, we can delve a little bit deeper into what some of these things are. We talked about the Forest Forever. Well, I didn't mention that Forest Forever mobile classroom. That was one of our first forays in how do we get out to schools? How do we get in front of kids? That got to 93,000 people in the state of Georgia. 64,000 of those kids, school-age kids. Another 25,000, just the general public. That mobile classroom was innovative. It was new. It gave people back in 1998 an opportunity to sit down at a computer. If we can think back that far, not everybody had a computer in their pocket or in their home or at their office. This was a great opportunity for kids to see that and see some educational messages associated with what we do. In 2012, we partnered with the Georgia Forestry Commission. This is a great example of how we can partner with other organizations that share our values, share our mission, and have the resources to deploy at scale throughout the state messaging to just the general community. Through that, we gave away 75,000 seedlings to people who want to go see the Lorax, to let them know that their forestry can be sustainable, and that wasn't necessarily a message that was embedded in that movie. And then, let me see. And then in 2013, we did a habitat build. We raised $100,000 for that, with great support from the industry to do a habitat build, one-time event. And then in 2014, as I mentioned before, raised $140,000 for Forestry, a foundation for our future, and that reached about 4,700 students. But one of the challenges for us are twofold. Every single one of these programs that I mentioned pretty much has had the challenge of either declining, inconsistent, or funding that disappeared. The mobile classroom, despite reaching 93,000 people, in some ways became a little obsolete. By the time that we had to re-up for that in 1996, I think it was, a lot of people did have computers. And we couldn't get the $65,000 we needed to keep that going. The second component, and that's just one example, but the second component is, were our programs reaching the right audience? So we have to ask ourselves, as Georgia grows, as Georgia changes, today we're at 9.8 million people, and you'll see that here in this slide. We're going to be at 14 million people pretty soon. Of that 9.8 million people, we've got 5.2 of them in Atlanta. And if you look around the rest of the state, we've got another 2 to 2.5 million people living in urban areas. That's places like Macon, Savannah, Rome, Athens, Valdosta, Tifton. Basically anywhere on that map that you see red is what we call an urban area. Now, for those of you that you're in the pulp industry, this is kind of interesting because everywhere except for Atlanta, we've got a pulp mill in red there. That means we've got to think about, what do people think about when they're behind a log truck on their way to work in the morning, to school? What do people think about when they drive 30 minutes out of town and they see a clear cut? What do people think about when they smell a pulp mill? Those are things that for us are important, because as we go from 9.8 million people to 14 million people, that bottom number there, the percentage of rural Georgians, is only going to get smaller. And that has an impact on us, whether we like it or not. A good way to think about this, too, as well, is in 1907, when the Georgia Forestry Association was started, we had exactly the opposite dynamic. 75% of the state was rural, and 25% was urban. So over the past 110 years, we've been on a gradual transformation in the state that's only picking up speed. Atlanta's the magnet city in the South. If you graduate from a lot of places in this country, it's a good place to find a job from college, whether it's a master's, PhD, high school degree, whatever it is. We'll continue to grow, and we've got to be able to reach those audiences. The second component for us is really, as we think about reaching out to all of Georgia, how do we do that? We know that that's not cheap. We know that that's something that we've got to be able to have funded over time. So as we think about being able to secure funding, we've got to be strategic, and you've got to be strategic, which is in part why we had why we have the speakers that we have today to help us think about that, maybe in new and innovative ways. But we also, unfortunately, Will Thompson couldn't join us today from James Bates, but he had a death in his family, and our thoughts and prayers are with him. But we've also got other folks that can help us think about it from the estate planning perspective too as well. So we embarked, as I mentioned before, on a strategic review process to help us think about where we're going to be in 20 years. This strategic review process really was designed to kind of address those weaknesses for us of funding and operating programs that are at scale. And when I say at scale, this is things that are statewide or that can reach millions of people, not just 300 or 5,000 or 10,000 or even 100,000. Can we reach 1 million people with our message? We're going to need to if Georgia's growing to 14 million people, right? And most of them are not in our communities. So that from that perspective, we thought about that. We wanted to make sure that as we develop recommendations for our trustees and our executive committee to hopefully discuss, review, and approve at some point, that we had a plan or recommendations that were focused, that were fundable, that were attainable, and that were measurable. And we've all had ideas of things that would be wonderful for us to do, but we've got to be able to measure them. If we go to another foundation, we go to another partner organization, and we ask for $100,000 or $1 million or $2 million, whatever that number is, they want to know that we're serious about spending that the way that you would spend that at your company, attainable, measurable, and those are things that we see every day in business, and we're going to run our foundation that exact same way. And so, from the perspective, we've created two strategic review teams that represent a wide group of stakeholders, folks that have done major lifts in fundraising, that understand that community. We've included folks in this discussion that understand how to reach an urban audience and how to work with partners in those audiences. We've included folks that represent some of our strongest landowners in our community and understand and have a passion for private property rights and protection of that. We've reached out to folks that understand industry and the challenges of having a smokestack right down the road from a neighborhood. We've had a group of folks in that included that have had decades of experience with our association, and each and one of our major key members in terms of folks that are engaged. So we have a good wide swath of folks who represent the interests of our industry, providing feedback and providing ideas on what we can do to kind of move the needle, to move the dial, to operate at scale, and maybe one day to be an example to the rest of the United States of America of how you share the message of forestry. You know, ever since I started in this industry, I've heard the same thing. We've got an awesome story to tell, but we don't tell it well. Guess what? We can fix that. It's within our power. It's within our control. We just got to get serious about it. So this is where that is in essence our challenge. You know, can we address these kind of long-term changes in demographics and knowing what that means about how people think about us and have the funding to do that. And when we think about that, you know, I wanted to put this up for you guys to start digesting a little bit. We've talked about this a good bit within our strategic review. And really it's kind of important to put things in buckets, if you will. When we think about the association and the foundation, they work hand in hand. And really, the foundation was designed always, and I think will always remain, as a support structure, as a support network, if you will, for the association, giving us the ability to do our mission better, to create the right policy and business climate for our industry in the state of Georgia. But we do that through two different ways. There's this. It's not a one-size-fits-all here, really. I guess ultimately is what that means. There's two different approaches that we can take. When we think about the association, you know, our main supporters are you, the industry, the landowners, the folks who have assets invested and capital invested in our industry. You guys are the folks that support us, right? When we think about what my main job is and what you've hired me and the rest of the staff and what we're focused in on, one of our core goals is to make sure that elected officials know what matters to you, that they know that sensible taxes and regulation are important, that they know that private property rights are the bedrock of the American economy in a lot of ways, and they're bedrock of our industry, and that we that's what you've hired me to do, and that's what your association does for you. And when we went through a strategic review that former Chairman John Godby did for us, you reaffirmed that. And so our goal is to really have forestry-friendly policy. I know these you can parse these words in lots of different ways, but we tried to make it super simple by saying, what's the one word we do at the association? We are your advocates. Political advocacy is at the heart of what we do. Since 1907, that's what we were created for, and that's what we're designed for. That's why your former chairman was a lobbyist, and former President Steve McWilliams, a lobbyist, and a darn good one at that. And you know, really, in that world of advocacy, we're putting out fires. You know, a lot of you guys have heard about Sandy Springs trying to ban the use of wood in buildings and construction. You know, that's something that we didn't plan on, and we've got to act now and in the next week, in the coming weeks, to stop that. Those are the types of we operate in a very tight time frame for the most part. But our foundation is a little bit different. You know, our foundation was really, and you can see it in the name of our building, you know, the Center for Forestry Education. Our foundation, in one word, more than anything, is designed to educate. And if you look at our projects, it's really designed to reach, you know, students, teachers, the greater community, you know, all those folks out there that have an opinion about what we do. Does that mean we need to go out and talk to them about, the building ordinances in Sandy Springs? Not really. They have no control and no power in Climax, Georgia, as to what Sandy Springs has got going on. But it does mean that we need at least their sympathetic support. We need folks that aren't going to say, "Don't ever cut another tree." That is not what we need. We need folks that understand that for us, forestry is a part of their every single day. For those of you that were at the Forestry Day at the Capitol and at the reception, you'll remember that I started off by asking everybody just to stop and be absolutely quiet. And everybody on the count of 3 took a deep breath. And when they did that, I asked them immediately afterwards to thank a landowner, because that breath came from a landowner. That same message has got to be, someone who planted trees, excuse me. That same message has got to be embedded in every single Georgian. Those 9.8 million Georgians today, those 14 million in the future, when they know that that air they breathe, that water they use, the house they live in, all depends on the things that we're about, that makes us stronger across multiple spectrums, and including advocacy. When a chairman or a committee member at the state capitol says to another one of our forestry champions like Chad Nimmer or Chuck Williams, all my constituents are from some metro part of Atlanta. They're all bankers and lawyers and doctors. Why should I care about truck weights? Why should I care about the lumber industry? Why should I care about landowner rights? We've got to be able to tell them, you know what, that banker's lending money to that doctor who's got 200 acres in Camden County that he uses to hunt, that he uses to fish, that he uses for something else. We've got to be able to break through those connections, those walls that are being built to exclude us from both the political and the common thoughts about what people think. When Sandy Springs is trying to tell people, don't live in a wooden house because it's going to catch on fire and kill you, which is their message. We've got to be able to communicate with people that wood is good. Wood is part of your daily life. And don't pass ordinances that reduce that ability for our industry to deliver that to you. So from that perspective, we think about education and the foundation, and we think about that in a more long-term perspective, and it's very important for us. So that's kind of been the underpinning strategy for where we're going with our strategic review. So we're still in the strategic review. We have had, we completed the phase 1 group meetings, but there's a couple of core concepts that I do feel, we feel comfortable sharing with you at this point. And one of those is that GFF, the foundation, will always support the mission of the association. Maybe in a slightly different way, but it's designed to support the mission of the association. The second is we know that we need funding at scale to support our long-term objectives. It doesn't do us good to start a project and then shut it down the next year or shut it down 2 years later. These are long-term projects, long-term propositions. It takes time to penetrate your message at scale throughout the state to that many people. And then finally, we know that for us, we've got to focus on leadership, we've got to focus on policy, and we've got to focus on education. Those are the 3 legs of the stool, and if you want to add funding, obviously, in there, those 4 legs of the stool are what really gets us over the finish line and makes us the best at what we do in the country, and that's being champions for forestry. So we have a second phase 1 completed their work. Phase 1 was really kind of built and designed to understand how do you raise millions of dollars, and also how do you penetrate into an urban market. Phase 2 was how do we make sure that our governance is strong, and how do we stay true to our mission. We've got the combination of the bright minds that have brought that together has been very powerful, and I think we've got we're close to having some recommendations that for review by our leadership. And so our GFA Executive Committee and our Board of Trustees will be able to review that once the second phase group finishes their final reviews and touch-ups of the recommendations. And then finally, in October, the Board of Directors for the Forestry Association will have the opportunity to discuss, review, and hopefully vote on those recommendations that set a course for us over the next 20 years to move the dial and to make sure that across the state, people care about what we do, and they know that we're a part of their every single day, their every breath, the products that they use, and that we need at least their sympathetic support of what we do, if not greater than that. But we'll hopefully we'll have leadership development inside our own association that can help us with strong champions for forestry. We'll also have folks outside of our industry that can help us just at the soccer field or at the baseball field or at their church. When people say something about our industry, that they can have a more informed opinion about what we are and what we do. So that's a little bit about where we're taking the foundation. And like I said, it's still a work in process, but ultimately it'll require your support. And so that gives us a great segue to our next speakers, who will talk about the different types of structures that are out there for philanthropy. At the end of the day, just like at home, if we don't have money for it, we're not going to buy it. So you'll hear a lot of things from me at my tenure at GFA, as long as you'll have me. But there's a couple of areas where our doors are always open, and if you want to write a check to the PAC or you want to write a check to the foundation, that door is always open. So thank you for the donation to our PAC today. We certainly appreciate that, and I'll turn it over to Jim Gillis.